My wife EMPTIED our accounts before leaving. She didn't know about my hidden investment. The cool air of the high-rise apartment did little to assuage the simmering tension in the room. Isolde stood across from me, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips, a manicured hand resting on the sleek marble countertop. Her voice, usually a melodic instrument of persuasion, was now sharp, laced with a cruel satisfaction I had grown all too accustomed to. "It's done, Theron," she declared, her eyes glinting with a cold triumph. "Every last penny. The joint accounts, the investment portfolios, even that small trust fund your grandmother left you, all liquidated, all transferred. You have nothing left. Absolutely nothing." She watched me, waiting for the crumble, the despair, the frantic outburst she believed myself incapable of suppressing. Her carefully constructed victory dance unfolded before me, a ballet of vindication choreographed in her own mind. She expected tears, pleas, a broken man. But I simply met her gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of my lips. My posture remained relaxed, my hands casually clasped behind my back. The silence stretched, thick with her anticipation and my quiet, unyielding calm. "Isolde," I said, my voice level, devoid of the panic she anticipated. "Are you quite certain of that assessment?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play games, Theron. I've been meticulous. Every account number, every password. I emptied them systematically, over months, right under your nose. Your little tech stocks, the bonds, the savings for that ridiculous future you always talked about, all gone. You're a software architect with a six-figure salary, and yet, you currently have less net worth than a barista. Congratulations on your freedom, darling. You're finally free of any financial burdens." Her laugh was brittle, sharp, echoing in the opulent living space that would soon be solely hers. She was so utterly convinced of her strategic genius, so assured of my ruin. Little did she know, her grand declaration of my financial demise was merely a prelude, an overture to a symphony she had neither composed nor could comprehend. I felt no anger, no panic, only a profound sense of quiet satisfaction, like a grandmaster watching his opponent confidently move a pawn, unaware of the checkmate unfolding elsewhere on the board. The true game, the real game, had been played in the shadows she never bothered to illuminate. And her victory, so meticulously planned and brazenly announced, was built on a foundation of sand, entirely oblivious to the bedrock of my true strength. The calmness that settled over me then wasn't born of resignation, but of foresight. It was the tranquility of a man who has carefully laid his traps, patiently watched them take root, and now merely waits for his adversary to step into them. Isolde believed she had stripped me bare, left me an empty shell. But what she had failed to grasp, what her materialistic mind could never conceive, was that my true wealth wasn't in the accounts she plundered, but in a quiet, calculated strength she had consistently underestimated. And that strength was about to yield returns she couldn't possibly imagine. My life with Isolde had been a slow, insidious drain, a gradual unraveling of trust and financial stability that, in hindsight, felt almost inevitable. When I first met her, Isolde was a whirlwind of charm and vivacity, a fashion designer with an eye for beauty and an infectious zest for life. I, a methodical and somewhat reserved software architect, found her magnetism captivating. She brought color and spontaneity into my meticulously structured world, and I, perhaps naively, saw a future where our contrasting natures would complement each other. We married quickly, swept up in a romance that, for her, seemed built on grand gestures and lavish experiences, and for me, on the hope of a shared, stable future. The cracks, predictably, began to show soon after the honeymoon blush faded. Isolde's zest for life translated into a pathological need for instant gratification, particularly when it came to finances. Our joint bank accounts became her personal piggy bank for designer clothes, exotic vacations, and impulse purchases that dwarfed our actual income. I, ever the pragmatist, tried to introduce budgets, long-term savings plans, the concept of delayed gratification. She'd nod, feign understanding, and then, a week later, another exorbitant charge would appear. My sacrifices began subtly. I'd pick up extra projects, work longer hours, always with the silent hope that she would eventually grasp the gravity of our financial situation. I shelved my own dream of investing in emerging tech, choosing instead to pour our money into more conventional, liquid assets she could easily access and just as easily deplete. I told myself it was love, patience. In truth, it was a slow erosion of my self-worth, a constant negotiation with a partner who saw my stability not as a foundation to build upon, but as a limitless resource to exploit. There were countless incidents. The time she bought a luxury car without discussing it, claiming it was an investment in her brand. The vacation home she put a down payment on, convinced we could simply make the money work. Each time, I ended up stepping in, scrambling to cover the deficit, to prevent our financial house from crumbling. She would apologize, shed a few tears, promise to change, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I would believe her. But the pattern always reasserted itself. Isolde lived in a perpetual state of now, untethered from the consequences of tomorrow. My wake-up call wasn't a single, dramatic event, but a culmination of countless small betrayals. It was the realization, cold and stark, that her apologies were merely a temporary cessation of hostilities, not a genuine shift in character. I saw her manipulative tactics for what they were, not expressions of love, but calculated moves to ensure her comfort at my expense. My calm demeanor was often misconstrued as passivity, my meticulous planning as rigidity. Isolde, in particular, viewed my quiet nature as a weakness, a testament to her superiority. She was the dynamic, charming one. I was the predictable, unassuming number cruncher. This underestimation was my greatest shield, and ultimately, my most potent weapon. I knew her better than she knew herself. I understood her insatiable need for control and material validation. And slowly, meticulously, I began to prepare for the inevitable. Not out of malice or a desire for revenge, but out of a primal need for self-preservation. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for independence. The genesis of my hidden weapon truly began 5 years ago. I've been following a promising but obscure tech startup called Quantum Leap Innovations. They were working on a revolutionary AI algorithm for data compression, something truly groundbreaking in its potential. At the time, they were barely a blip on the radar, a small team of brilliant minds operating out of a garage. Most investors saw too much risk, too little immediate return. But my architectural mind, trained to see patterns and long-term potential where others saw only chaos, recognized their genius. I started diverting a small portion of my income, money Isolde never knew existed because it never touched our joint accounts. I opened a separate, entirely discrete brokerage account, registered under a unique designation, completely untraceable to our marital assets. Every bonus, every freelance project payment I managed to squirrel away, went directly into that account. It was a slow, painstaking process. Many times, I wanted to tell Isolde about the potential, to share this exciting opportunity, but the thought of her squandering it, or worse, demanding to control it, always held me back. I was protecting my future, my sanity, from the very person I was supposed to be building a future with. I bought shares in Quantum Leap Innovations at their seed funding stage when they were mere cents per share. It was a significant risk, a gamble I knew I might lose. But I believed in their vision, in the quiet, focused brilliance of their founders, a stark contrast to the superficiality that permeated my home life. This investment was my secret garden, a sanctuary of financial hope untainted by Isolde's relentless consumption. I never discussed it, never checked it in her presence, never even thought of it as a tool against her. It was simply my independent pathway to financial security, a failsafe for the inevitable reality I knew, deep down, was coming. This wasn't about her downfall. It was about my survival. It was my quiet declaration of self-worth against a tide of financial negligence. As the years passed, Isolde's sense of entitlement only grew. She became bolder in her financial maneuvers, convinced that my placid exterior masked a financial ineptitude she could easily exploit. My calm demeanor became her green light, her signal that I was too naive or too indifferent to notice her increasingly audacious steps. She started talking about her money, her investments, subtly excluding me from discussions about our joint financial future, even while diligently emptying our shared coffers. I watched her, patiently. I saw the spreadsheet she meticulously kept, tracking every joint asset, every shared account. I saw her surreptitiously changing passwords, diverting mail, intercepting financial statements that might reveal her machinations. She thought she was being covert, a master of deception. In reality, her efforts were clumsy, transparent to eyes trained to identify patterns and anomalies. As a software architect, I was accustomed to dissecting complex systems, identifying vulnerabilities, and predicting outcomes. Isolde's machinations were, for me, a simple algorithm, predictable in its avarice. I allowed her to believe she was succeeding. My feigned disinterest in our joint finances was a strategic withdrawal, a deliberate act of non-engagement that only fueled her hubris. When she's asked about our savings, I would offer vague, non-committal answers, nodding along as she confidently declared she was managing everything. She mistook my silence for ignorance, my patience for weakness. It was fascinating, almost morbidly so, to observe her escalating confidence, her smug satisfaction at what she perceived as my cluelessness. Meanwhile, in my own quiet corner of the financial universe, quantum leap innovations was gaining traction. What started as whispers in niche tech forums slowly grew into murmurs in industry publications. Their AI algorithm, once a theoretical marvel, was now being hailed as a game changer. Major tech companies began to take notice. The value of my investment, once a hopeful gamble, began its slow, steady climb, then accelerated into a dizzying ascent. I received quarterly reports, discreetly delivered to a private P.O. box, detailing the astronomical growth. Each quarter, the numbers would send a quiet thrill through me, a validation of my foresight. I never acted on it, never touched the funds, never even considered sharing the news. It was my sanctuary, awaiting the day I would truly need it. Isolde, meanwhile, continued her work. She drained the last remnants of our emergency fund, confident I wouldn't notice until it was too late. She sold off the last of our traditional stock portfolio, the one I had carefully diversified over years, convinced the market was about to crash, a convenient lie to justify her liquidation. She even took out a significant loan against the value of our house, forging my signature, believing I was too distracted or too foolish to ever uncover it. Each act, a confirmation of her contempt, a deepening of the chasm between us. She was preparing for her grand exit, ensuring she would leave me with nothing but debt and a fractured sense of self. But my preparations were equally meticulous and infinitely more effective. While she focused on dismantling our shared past, I was quietly building my future. The knowledge of my hidden investment was a constant, solid anchor in a sea of emotional turmoil. It allowed me to remain calm, controlled, even as the storm raged around me. I faced her accusations, her increasingly cruel remarks about my supposed financial incompetence, with an unblinking gaze, a quiet strength she couldn't penetrate. She saw a defeated man. I saw a man perfectly poised for a strategic checkmate. And the stage for that confrontation was about to be set. The day came, as I knew it would. It was a Tuesday, a crisp autumn morning, when Isolde's lawyer sent the formal divorce papers. They were, predictably, aggressive. Demands for spousal support, division of assets heavily skewed in her favor, a detailed inventory of what she believed were her contributions to our shared life, meticulously itemized down to the last decorative pillow. It was a declaration of war, built on the premise that I was financially vulnerable, a man easily broken. My own lawyer, a seasoned veteran named Mr. Harrison, reviewed the documents with a grimace. "Theron," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose, "Isolde has painted a very clear picture here. She claims you've contributed little to the joint finances, that your income was largely consumed by your own frivolous pursuits. Ironic, given her spending habits. And she's presented detailed evidence of her managing and growing the marital assets, only to find them depleted." He paused, looking at me with a mixture of concern and professional curiosity. "Are you truly in such a precarious position?" I leaned back in my chair, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Mr. Harrison," I replied, my voice calm and steady, "Isolde's narrative is, shall we say, a highly selective interpretation of reality. She has indeed been managing our joint assets. And to her credit, she has been quite thorough in ensuring they are no longer in our joint names. However, her understanding of my financial standing, and indeed, of the full scope of our marital assets, falls considerably short." I reached into my briefcase, pulling out a slim, innocuous-looking folder. Inside were neatly organized documents, brokerage statements, legal agreements, and a recent valuation report from a reputable financial firm. 5 years ago, Mr. Harrison, I began. I made an individual investment. A long-term, high-risk venture in a then-unknown tech startup named Quantum Leap Innovations. This investment was made entirely with funds I earned independently, funds that never entered our joint accounts or were subject to our joint financial management. Mr. Harrison picked up the valuation report. His eyes widened slightly as he scanned the figures. The calm, professional demeanor of the seasoned lawyer began to crack, replaced by an expression of pure astonishment. "Theron," he breathed, looking up from the page, This is substantial. Quantum Leap Innovations, they just announced their IPO 2 weeks ago, didn't they? Valued at over $1 billion on their first day of trading. You were an early investor. I nodded. Indeed. Their algorithmic compression technology has revolutionized data management. My initial investment, which was considerable at the time for me, has now yielded returns exponentially beyond anything Isolde could have possibly imagined, let alone pilfered. The preliminary divorce settlement meeting was scheduled for the following week. It was to be a small affair, just the lawyers, Isolde, and myself, in a private conference room at Mr. Harrison's firm. Isolde arrived, predictably, late, dressed in an impeccably tailored designer suit, her hair styled perfectly, an air of smug superiority radiating from her. She greeted me with a patronizing nod, her eyes sweeping over me as if cataloging my assumed decline. "Theron," she purred, taking her seat opposite me. "You look, well, considering." Her lawyer, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Davies, gave a terse nod, placing a thick binder on the table. The meeting began with Ms. Davies presenting Isolde's meticulously prepared financial statements, detailing my supposed lack of contribution, her tireless efforts to manage our finances, and the devastating losses she had incurred due to my negligence. She spoke of my reckless spending, a truly ironic accusation coming from Isolde, and her fear for her financial stability should she not receive substantial spousal support and the lion's share of our remaining assets. The narrative was clear. Isolde was the victim. I was the financially irresponsible husband. Isolde punctuated her lawyer's presentation with dramatic sighs and carefully orchestrated expressions of sorrow, often casting pitying glances in my direction. "I truly believed we could build a life together, Theron," she lamented, her voice thick with feigned emotion. "But your inability to manage money, your constant distractions. I just couldn't keep us afloat." I remained silent, observing her performance with a detached interest. I felt no resentment, only a quiet certainty. Ms. Davies concluded her presentation, confident that she had painted a picture of undeniable financial hardship for her client and overwhelming culpability for me. The room fell silent, everyone looking at me, expecting a response, an argument, a breakdown. "Thank you, Ms. Davies, Isolde," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. "Your financial assessment of our collective assets, particularly those under Isolde's direct management, is indeed quite thorough. It appears you've accounted for every penny that was in our joint names." Isolde smiled, a thin, triumphant line. "As I said, Theron, meticulous." "Indeed," I replied, meeting her gaze. "However, it seems you may have overlooked a rather significant detail. A substantial asset that was never part of our joint finances, never subject to your meticulous management, and therefore, never fell within the scope of your liquidations." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Isolde's smile faltered slightly. Mr. Harrison, my lawyer, gave me a subtle nod, a silent cue to proceed. I picked up my slim folder. "Approximately 5 years ago, I invested a sum of money, entirely separate from our marital income, into an emerging tech startup. At the time, it was a high-risk venture, known only to a select few in the industry. That company, Quantum Leap Innovations, has since grown into a global leader in AI and data compression. 2 weeks ago, they completed their initial public offering." I slid the valuation report across the table, directly to Ms. Davies. She picked it up, her expression a mixture of curiosity and professional skepticism. As her eyes scanned the numbers, her face went utterly blank, then flushed a deep crimson. Her grip on the paper tightened visibly. Isolde, seeing her lawyer's sudden, dramatic shift, leaned forward, a flicker of unease crossing her features. "Ms. Davies," I continued, my voice unwavering, "you'll find that my investment, which comprised a significant number of shares purchased at an incredibly low valuation, now represents a substantial portion of Quantum Leap Innovations' market capitalization. The attached financial statement, from a reputable broker, reflects the current value of those holdings." Ms. Davies pushed the document towards Isolde, her hand trembling slightly. Isolde snatched it, her eyes quickly scanning the figures. The color drained from her face, leaving her ashen. She stopped breathing, her eyes fixated on the number at the bottom of the page, a number with so many zeros it seemed to stretch into infinity. The triumphant smirk she'd worn minutes earlier melted away, replaced by a look of utter, profound shock. This is impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes darted from the document to me, then back again, as if trying to reconcile the broken man she thought she had created with the multimillionaire now calmly sitting across from her. Not impossible, Isolde, I corrected softly. Just unforeseen by you. This investment was never part of our marital estate. It was never coming led with our joint funds. It was my safeguard, quietly nurtured, completely separate. And as such, it is not subject to spousal claims. Mr. Harrison then leaned forward, a professional glint in his eye. Furthermore, Ms. Davies, given the scale of Mr. Theron's separate assets and the recent discovery of various financial irregularities, including forged signatures on loan documents related to the marital home, we believe it is now Ms. Isolde who may be facing the difficult position of proving her financial needs. In fact, we may well be filing counterclaims regarding financial misconduct. The silence that followed was deafening. Isolde stared at me, her mouth slightly ajar, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my very eyes. The cunning, manipulative woman who believed she had outsmarted me was utterly, completely unprepared for this reality. Her grand plan had not only failed, but had spectacularly backfired. The game wasn't over, but the final moves were now undeniably in my favor. The immediate aftermath of the reveal was a chaotic symphony of disbelief and legal maneuvering. Isolde, stripped of her composure, descended into a frantic tirade, accusing me of deceit, of hiding money, of being a monster. Her voice grew shrill, her meticulously styled hair coming loose as she ran her hands through it. The confident, poised woman who had walked into the room was gone, replaced by a desperate, unraveling shell. Ms. Davies, her face still pale, tried to regain control, but even she seemed thrown off balance. She muttered apologies to Mr. Harrison, requesting a recess, clearly needing to regroup and reassess their entire strategy. The air was thick with the scent of crushed ambition. I watched Isolde's meltdown with a quiet, almost detached, sense of observation. There was no joy in her suffering, no triumphant gloating, just a profound sense of closure. The years of quiet frustration, the slow erosion of my peace, the constant anxiety of her endless spending, all of it seemed to dissipate in that moment. The weight I had carried for so long, the burden of her financial recklessness, lifted from my shoulders. I felt an immense lightness, a freedom I hadn't realized I was so desperately craving. Mr. Harrison, on the other hand, was barely containing his satisfaction. He clapped me lightly on the shoulder as Isolde and her lawyer retreated. "Theron," he said, a wide grin spreading across his face. That was masterful. Absolutely masterful. I've handled hundreds of these cases, but rarely have I seen a strategic play quite so devastatingly effective. He paused, his eyes twinkling. You truly are a quiet force. Word of the meeting, or at least the outcome, seemed to travel quickly. Whispers turned to outright conversations among our mutual acquaintances. Those who had silently judged me for allowing Isolde to seemingly walk all over me, or worse, believed Isolde's narrative of my financial ineptitude, now looked at me with a newfound respect, even awe. I received calls from estranged family members, expressing their concern during my difficult time, which I knew was code for, "We heard you came out on top." I handled them all with the same calm, controlled demeanor I had shown Isolde. There was no need to explain, no need to justify. My actions spoke for themselves. Isolde's legal position was now precarious. Her initial demands for spousal support were immediately withdrawn, replaced by a desperate plea to simply get out of the marriage with some dignity, and without being liable for the significant loan she had taken out against the house. My lawyer expertly navigated the negotiations, ensuring that while I wasn't punitive, I was certainly not charitable. The divorce settlement reflected the reality. Isolde walked away with the house, burdened by the mortgage she had increased, and very little else. Her dreams of continuing her lavish lifestyle on my dime crumbled into dust. Months passed. The divorce was finalized, bringing with it a profound sense of peace. My life took on a quiet rhythm I hadn't experienced in years. I continued my work as a software architect, not out of necessity, but out of genuine passion. The massive returns from quantum leap innovations were now securely managed, providing a financial cushion that allowed me unprecedented freedom. I invested wisely, diversified my portfolio, and even dedicated a significant portion to philanthropic endeavors, supporting educational programs in STEM fields, a personal passion that had long been sidelined. Isolde, I heard through the grapevine, struggled considerably. Her fashion design business, which had always relied heavily on my financial support, languished without her ability to freely spend. Her attempts to maintain her opulent lifestyle quickly drained her limited resources, and she was forced to downsize, to live within the means she had so painstakingly created for herself. She frequently attempted to contact me, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, but I simply declined, having closed that chapter of my life. There was nothing more to be said. Our stories had diverged completely. My path forward was one of purpose and quiet fulfillment. I found joy in the simple things: a challenging coding problem, a walk in nature, reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my tumultuous marriage. I had learned invaluable lessons about trust, about self-preservation, and about the quiet power of being consistently underestimated. My wealth wasn't just financial. It was a wealth of peace, independence, and hard-won wisdom. The entire experience reinforced a fundamental truth I had always intuitively understood. True strength often lies not in outward displays of power or in the ability to dominate, but in quiet preparation, unwavering self-reliance, and an unshakable belief in one's own foresight. Life will inevitably throw challenges your way, and sometimes those challenges come from the very people you expect to build a future with. But by cultivating your own quiet garden, by investing in your unique abilities and long-term vision, you create a sanctuary that no external force can plunder, no betrayal can shatter. The greatest revenge is not to react with anger or despair, but to live a fulfilling life, proving that your worth was never dependent on their validation or your security on their goodwill. Build your own bedrock, quietly, meticulously, and your resilience will be your greatest triumph.